I'm here with my buddy Tony Gilardi. I'll let him introduce himself.
I'm Tony from Simply Fresh and Michigan Farm to Family. We're direct to consumer Michigan local food. So we deliver direct to consumer for Michigan farms. I'm here with Ray, and we just got some beef back from our butcher. It just looks absolutely amazing, great marbling. We cooked a couple up, they're extremely tender, beautiful product.
And where'd you get the beef from?
Ray Moses.
So some of my beef, guys. I'm pretty proud of it.
Even the marbling in the roast is excellent. So this will break down in a crock pot beautifully.
What cut is that?
This is a bottom round roast.
Okay.
So
All
these
right.
are great for, stewing beef,
Yeah.
pot roast. Just
Okay.
throw in a crock pot with some great vegetables, rutabaga.
Yeah.
We got some awesome butcher boxes coming out with this. We even have a sampler box. First time we've ever done a sampler where you get one of each cut, try it, and then you can decide what you might want to buy later.
Okay. How do you decide what cuts to have a animal cut up as for your retail?
Well, we usually go with fan favorites. What are people used to cooking? Everybody out of any kind of half cow or full cow, they always want the steak cuts. They want the ribeyes, the New York strips, the tenderloins, sirloins. So some other things need a little education to go along with it. But all in all, stew meat's very easy. And then we have the rest of the really hard to use cuts put in a grind.
Yeah.
We sell a lot of ground beef.
And you're selling mostly or all grass-fed, forage-finished beef? Or
All
100%.
Yeah.
So
All local beef.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We sell no commodity beef whatsoever.
Okay. What are are there any challenges to getting the quality you need for the retail market?
Well, that's all based on the relationship with working with a farmer that knows the genetics of their animal, what they're feeding it. The real challenge has been getting it butchered.
Yeah.
And what we've chosen to do during the pandemic is we've built our relationships with direct right with the butcher. So there's no middleman. So the farmer raises the beef, we make them an appointment, they take it in, we work all the cut sheets with the butcher, we pay them, and then we go and pick up the beef when it's ready. And that streamlining has been real helpful for not only the farmer, but the butcher, and everyone's getting paid on time, which is how you keep your placement in line.
Right. Because my experience is you've been the only retailer that really puts your your action about wanting to market local products, local farm-raised products to the consumer.
Yeah, it started in about 2010.
Yeah.
And it just was a slow go.
Right.
A lot of people were first introduced to local beef.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't know where their beef came from.
Yeah.
And it's just been building on that. And then when we opened up the new store, we said no commodity beef, only Michigan beef.
Yeah.
So we kind of force our consumer into supporting local farms, which is better for the overall economy.
Right. And most, my experience is most people can't do what you're doing.
Well, you have to have an end use for everything that comes from an animal.
Yeah.
So you got to be able. So what we do here at Simply Fresh, we have direct to consumer, we have retail, and then we have a kitchen.
Yeah.
So the kitchen allows us to use a lot of the cuts that might not sell.
Right.
But over the last 2 years, we've recently developed a pretty big following on organ meat. So one of the hard things was to always get rid of organ meat, but organ meat has really become extremely popular, whether it be for people cooking it up for themselves or making raw dog food.
Yeah.
But we can guarantee that the animals, the organ meat that they're getting comes from a very healthy animal that isn't filled with growth hormones and antibiotics.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you said the key there about you have to be able to use the whole product, and that's why a guy like me can't sell to, say, a restaurant. A restaurant wants...
The restaurant is they're used to buying box beef,
Yeah.
where they're gonna put ribeye on the menu, or they're gonna put tenderloin on the menu, and they don't realize that one cow has one tenderloin, that might be good for maybe a half a Saturday night.
Right.
But I believe that if you really look at the concept of farm to table and buy beef by the half for a restaurant and inventory it and slack it out and build your menu based on all the cuts, it can actually bring down your food cost extremely.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the things, big part of education about local beef too is it's frozen.
Right.
People think frozen is somewhat not as good as fresh. I prefer selling frozen beef because it never breaks the cold chain. It's processed, it's frozen immediately. It never goes up and down in temperature. Imagine on an 80-degree Michigan day where you have fresh beef processed, then it comes out of the cooler, goes onto a truck. It sits on the back of the truck, it gets unloaded into the restaurant, it sits out before it goes directly in. You know, there's so many ups and downs in the temperature. If this is properly thawed, which is, you know, a steak this size would take 1 day in the refrigerator, put it out, let it come to room temperature so that the entire steak is the same temperature. If you cook this steak cold, the inside is going to be colder than the outside, and then the outside is going to cook faster than the inside. So you're going to have overdone on the outside and you're going to have raw in the middle. You let this thing sit out for about an hour, completely room temperature.
Right. What's the biggest problem you could be dealing with farmers that wanna try to say, hey, I want to sell you beef or chicken or pork? You know, here we're talking about beef.
Well, the biggest problem, I think, is that our retail market hasn't caught up, and this is the first time in history where the prices in the grocery store for commodity are starting to catch up to the smaller producers that have more expensive growing costs. But the biggest challenge was always making sure that the farmer could get enough money so that they could be sustainable. I've seen a lot of farmers get into it and then they're out. And you know, that's a challenge when you're trying to promote a product. I need a steady inventory, because if customers choose to go with this beef and this is the beef they're going to feed their family, they're going to want to be ordering it constantly.
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse than when a customer goes to click on an item and you're out of stock.
Yeah.
They're going to look elsewhere.
Do you, because, you know, I guess one thing too I was getting at is that a lot of farmers will complain about the modern food distribution network and retailers and restaurants trying to deal with them. They're impossible to deal with, but not all farmers are up to speed on how to produce a quality product, right? To just all of a sudden get into this,
Sure.
thinking it's easy money and stuff.
If you buy an animal and you put it in the backyard, typically that animal isn't going to eat like someone that is raising the perfect genetics and feeding the right diet to an animal for the right amount of time. We
Yeah.
know that a grass-fed finished animal takes a lot longer to get it to weight.
Right.
And it needs to eat the right diet. If it's just eating anything that's put out on just someone's backyard, it could be, you know, and you gotta have a great seasoned butcher that can understand aging and how to cut it too also. So
Right. Okay.
it kind of play back and forth. You could raise the most perfect animal, but if the butcher doesn't know what they're doing, that ruins the animal.
Yeah, and I've seen that before.
You've witnessed that.
Yeah, bad cutting. Is this how do you describe visually the quality of, say, this beef here?
So this looks like some of the American Wagyu that we've brought in. It's extremely marbleized. I mean, this actually looks more marbled than I would say USDA prime beef. This is excellent physically looking. The first thing that we do is we take a variety of steaks and roast and burger, and we cook it in our kitchen here at Simply Fresh to actually taste it before we even put it up online for inventory, to make sure that it meets our quality standard. And this is just a wonderful piece of meat. Now, this could probably bring more money than your average local ribeye, but here at Simply Fresh and Michigan Farm to Family, we don't play that game. This is sold for the same price for the beef that you brought us, say, 90 days ago.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right, Tony. Well, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ray.
Appreciate it.
Well, I hope that gave everybody a little bit of insight
into, selling beef to the retailer. It's a way to have a lot of your difficulties and problems taken care of, because one thing for sure is that there's a definite problem with the supply chain infrastructure on getting beef processed, getting it transported, and all that problem. So, selling to direct to the consumer a lot of times is the way, like instead of me selling to the retailer, like I showed you, the other option is, most of us want to sell direct to the consumer. So there isn't even a middle person there. However, the problem I was running into was we got that bottleneck of processing, and processing has become so difficult because our small processors that have stayed open during the perceived labor shortages and the destruction of our free market economy and supply chain infrastructure over the last year, but they can't meet the demand of large scale, processing. So, I got put in line with the family that brings in a steer once in a year. Somebody's bringing in 20, 30 head to market a year, is still paying retail. So I'm trying to retail my product, but I'm paying retail for processing. And when in this farming business, we can't pay retail and expect to retail our product. No legitimate business makes any money doing that. So dealing with somebody like Tony, who I've been dealing with now for the better part of a dozen years, 15 years, however long it's been, he's got leverage to deal with a processor to get appointments, standing appointments, things booked. He handles transportation of that product back. A lot of us are driving 100, 200 mile round trip for processing. Truck and trailer, heavy light duty pickup truck cost is, probably $1 a mile of just operating costs. So, there's $100 to $200 to $300 of transportation that you have to factor into that product. And if you're not putting a pencil to your product, you're missing out. And I find that a lot of farmers, there's no pencil being put there. That's the only thing dealing with a retailer. They do, that's a retailer I can work with. We've been working together for years, and we both want each other to make money. Most of the time when you are trying to direct market and you have extra beef and you go, okay, I'm going to try to deal with a restaurant or a grocery store, and they are some of the worst people you can deal with. They're horrible. Because I've done that too, where, years ago I used to grow, 10 acres of sweet corn. I've also grown acres of hard squash and pumpkins and sold direct to grocery stores. And, but the caveat to that too is that a lot of farmers are pretty inconsistent in their quality of their product. So as you can see, I'm really proud of this beef. I mean, it is not easy to get beef marbled like this. And this is like he said, it's like Wagyu quality. So this is from a small to medium framed Angus. These are heifers. A lot of us that direct market, particularly if you're forage finishing beef, will keep that age class and sex class of animals that we think are going to fatten up easier, and put the muscle fat in here, the marbling, muscular deposition of fats called marbling. And we tried it because heifers will put that on easier. We try to stack the cards in our favor. It's just like if you're feeding grain and corn. A lot of times the reason why we feed corn, it's a good insurance policy. You're very much guaranteed you're going to get a good product if you're going to properly finish them on grain. But you can improperly do that too. You can take bad genetics on grain-fed animal and, say, hey, I'm going to throw them grain for 30 days before I take them in, and they may not have the result, But yeah, it's Black Angus genetics. 30 months of age though. So, that's the only caveat to it. You got to keep your costs down
so that you can afford to have an animal for 30 months on feed and still make a profit. It's kind of tough to do. So at some point you got to really moderate your expenses when you're doing that. But the cattle market's tough right now anyways. But I found a retailer I can really work with. He's taken a lot of the headaches out of things for me, getting scheduled with the processor. And because, you know, processing costs keep going up and up and up. And I think that's going to kill a lot of us that think we're going to make money direct marketing beef. I think you're going to see a lot of people get back out of it. A lot of people all of a sudden got into it. I think a lot of people are going to drop out because they just can't afford the processing. You know, processors are taking half the money profit you could make goes right into processing. So, all right. Talk to y'all later.